So I watched Curtis Connor's most recent video about time travel, and towards the middle, he said that he didn't totally see the link between spirituality and time travel. I think aesthetically mostly is what didn't jive for him. But towards the end, he gave his take on his experience of it with the box staying closed, which was basically like, I'm never going to know. I can just choose to believe this timeline exists, and it makes me feel better. It doesn't hurt me to believe it, so I might as well. And that's one take on spirituality, but I feel like there's more meat there for a rational person to really engage with the idea that the metaphysical might exist, and how using your consciousness, not your body, but your consciousness to move through time, that has more of a basis than just believing because it feels good. So I invite Curtis and anyone else who's skeptical but curious to sit down with me. I've tried to make this as short as possible with lots of pictures and very simple language. So enjoy. Also, if you already fuck with the metaphysical stuff and you just are interested in the time travel part, you can skip to this timestamp. If you don't need me to tell you why hard determinism is a really big problem for agency and ethics, and it gives us a pretty good reason to consider there might be something beyond this 3D material reality, then you're good. If none of that shit I just said makes sense, then keep watching. So when I think about the tricky part about spirituality and what gives the ick is this idea of like the snake oil salesman. Because when we're talking about medical science, if this guy, he's selling this oil and he says, oh, it's going to make your hair grow, we can conduct research, right? And we'll find out if that's true. And if it's not, we can come back to him with a peer-reviewed study and say, hey, no, it doesn't. No, it does not. It's a measuring stick, right? It's a dependable measuring stick, and it's how we can deal with bullshit in a useful way. Let me finish drawing my scientist here. Okay, but now imagine that same snake oil salesman. He's not claiming it grows your hair back, but he's saying this snake oil raises your energetic vibrations. Now, what the fuck does that even mean? When it's something that vague and subjective, he can pretty much claim anything he wants. And spirituality by nature it's about your subjective experience a lot of the time. Baked into it is this level of ambiguity, and that makes it really easy for bad actors to manipulate people. And this is especially bad because a lot of the people who are coming to snake oil salesmen like this are really desperate. They're in like situations where they have tried everything or they feel like there's no answers and they're looking for anything. Like, oh my God, my boyfriend left me. He was my soulmate. I need to get him back. Or my mother died and I didn't get to say this one thing to her. Please, let me have a chance to just make some closure with this. I'm not making a judgment on whether like there are good faith people who work with mediumship and spirituality. I'm like open to that sort of thing, but you combine the ambiguity with the clients who are desperate. It's very easy to manipulate people. And so I think for a lot of us, we're like, hey, let's not even go there then. This is all bullshit. And also, we don't really have evidence for any of this shit, right? Why are we believing in this? A lot of this stuff really seems like wishful thinking, magical thinking, wanting to control things that we can't control. Human exceptionalism, like, why is God a man in the sky, right? That seems very arbitrary and human centered. Why would he be good based on our definition of what good is? It's like believing in Santa Claus is one way to think about it, right? A skeptical way to think about it. This is supposed to be a dragon. I don't know why. He's a magical creature, I guess. Um, anyway, okay, so let's talk about the hard science approach. Basically, like this, I'm going to represent the universe as the earth, but okay. This material reality, this 3D situation, we're saying like that's all that exists. Whatever we can see with science, we can touch, we can feel, that's what exists, or at least that's what like we're worried about. That's the reality we exist in. And so that's really nice because science gives us a way to manipulate that reality because there are consistent rules, right? The obvious one is gravity. I drop something, it falls consistently, always. And so we have laws. We have laws of nature. And this is like very, very useful. Again, like I said, that measuring stick, like what's bullshit and what's not, because it's consistent. Everything is consistent. Everything is predictable. This However, it's a bit tricky because we run into the thing called determinism. And maybe you guys have heard of that. It's basically the idea that everything is predetermined, or at least let's say hard determinism. That's a little bit of a in the weeds distinction. But to be clear, hard determinism. Basically, everything that happens is predetermined. Nothing is random. No matter what you do, all of your choices are controlled in a way, or like everything is like falling dominoes. And so what you lose is a sense of agency. How do you spell agency? There's no sense of agency in this world where everything is determined, right? You don't control your actions. You don't get a say because everything is just falling. You might be tempted to say, well, human beings, living creatures, have the capacity to make choices. In your subjective experience, it does seem like that. I picked French toast instead of Cheerios today. That may be true, but the hard determinist is going to say if we zoom out into the idea of like the whole universe, that choice was determined by a million different factors like your DNA, right? Your biology or your cultural influences. I know I was drawing it. I was going to draw a holly leaf, okay? It was like Christmas. That's what I thought for culture. I don't know. But you know what I mean. One other way to think about this is the primordial soup. This is a very oversimplified way to think about this. But, this is how we conceive of life starting. At least one idea. Lightning came down, and that energy started off this mitosis. And as these cells split, the energy from one cell was transferred to the other cell. And then the fish, when they started having fish babies, the energy of their life was transferred to the baby fish. What does a baby fish look like? I don't know, like this. This energy, this lightning strike, this electricity has been going down throughout the millennia, boop, 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 until we get to us, these little hairless monkeys. And we have these really complex brains. But the complexity of that is kind of obscuring the fact that in our brains are just little electrical impulses. Boop, boop. It's the same thing that's going on there. It's a very complex mechanism. And also, we have this first person perspective of it. So it feels like we're making these choices. But if we're taking this like that the physical world is all that exists, we have to understand the consequence of saying that is that we are no different than any of these other things. We are controlled by physical laws as much as anything else. Everything physical is controlled by these laws. We are physical beings. And so we are as predictable as anything else. That's the logic behind it anyway. There are more nuanced there's more nuanced ways to defend determinism and agency, but this is basically the problem of it. Okay, so that idea of determinism, first of all, it's uncomfortable in terms of like agency, right? We like to believe that we have some control, like it's just uncomfortable, but also it's a big problem for ethics. How do we hold people accountable? How do we have any meaningful sense of ethics if no one is making a choice? They're just doing what they're doing. This is a big problem. We need to believe in free will for a lot of things to make sense. And it's tricky to imagine how free will makes sense in hard determinism. And believing only in a material reality, it's hard to understand how to get out of hard determinism. There are more nuanced ways that I am not as good at describing because I don't find them necessarily convincing, but that is kind of the impetus to say, okay, well, that's kind of uncomfortable. And also we have this idea of consciousness. This is like an experiential argument or idea, not so much like a logical one. But we kind of we spawn into this world, kind of like video game characters. We're operating in this like first person perspective, which is kind of weird when you think about it. You're like one seemingly arbitrary person. Why is that? Why am I here? Why is it like this? You know, what is consciousness? This is something that we still don't really know. It doesn't really fit in any model that science understands like fully. We're getting closer, but we still don't really know. And so all of this is not really a problem of logic. It is very uncomfortable. And it goes very counter to our experience of consciousness. We like to believe we have choices. We want to understand how we are conscious beings. And this model of only a 3D reality doesn't really get there. So we say, okay, let's just think about what might be an alternative. If there's something other than physical, this is the physical. The outside of that, we're going to call it the metaphysical. It's like the above the physical, not like literally above, but metaphorically or around. You think about what the term meta means. Meta commentary is like a commentary on the commentary. Anyway, so this is the metaphysical. Woo. And then we're here in the physical. The thing with this is we don't really know what this looks like, do we? And at this point, we're kind of just like pulling shit out of our ass. a lot of when we're talking about the metaphysical, we are describing our experience. It's like describing things like, people have encounters with ghosts or with spirits. People have things like their fucking poster falls off the wall. And you say, oh, was that a sign from the universe? Was that an influence from something in the metaphysical that caused this poster to fall that was trying to tell us something? Was this caused by something more that's up here in this woo-woo land? When we're conceiving of how we can have agency, we want to believe that our consciousness doesn't necessarily operate by physical laws. It's doing something else. So we might think that it is in the metaphysical, or at least has one foot in the metaphysical. Maybe it's a metaphysical entity. This is what you'd call your spirit, right? And it's here. And so it's using you can call it the powers it has access to in the metaphysical. And then you have this like video game avatar, basically. So this is one model. So how does this relate to time travel after all that fucking preamble? So this is Kurtis. This is the real Kurtis. This is the meat bag he gets to control. Sorry. It's not a derogatory. It's just a description of what a body is, okay? This is your physical avatar person. So when you're talking about time travel, who is time traveling? Who is time travel? So if you're thinking about like sci-fi movies, the idea is that your meat bag is going into some time machine and is somehow physically going into the future, like bending space time to put your little meat bag back in time to whenever 2016, excuse me. And I guess the idea is then you would have two copies of yourself. There's Kurtis with his mustache, and then Harry Styles ass Kurtis, right? And so, but it's all happening here in the physical. Your physical body is traveling from the future to the past somehow and interacting with your past physical self. And this is where we end up with a lot of paradoxes, like this issue that's like, oh no, now there's two Curtises. What the fuck is going on there? How does that influence the timeline? So all of this is like, that's one thing. But if we go back to this other model, this metaphysical spirit guy is the real Kurtis, then your physical avatar doesn't need to travel in space time. And this metaphysical guy, he's in what we would call the collective unconscious. You're not limited by space and time. It's kind of like a big ocean, I imagine. And so this spirit version of Kurtis, your little orb of consciousness, he can move along the timeline in a way that your physical body cannot, right? Like you can actually put yourself back into this other Kurtis and you can give him a vision. You can say, oh my God, they're fucking roasting you on Tumblr. So this is still kind of tricky because you have this conscious experience. And normally you're going along with this avatar as he like linearly travels through space, right? We have this idea, at least, that there's this like continuous consciousness and you're following this avatar and the way it experiences time. And I think if you open up to the idea of the metaphysical, it's not necessarily working that way. Every night you go to sleep, you dream. Where do you go? Could it be other dimensions? Maybe you are traveling back in time to other versions of yourself, other people. Are you experiencing their thoughts, right? When you have this collective unconscious, this is getting soupy, but that's kind of the idea, right? This conscious experience is not tied to being in this brain. So you might already be time traveling. So what is the purpose of these like time travel objects? Because they're still kind of fun, right? And I'm not putting off like physical time travel. I'm agnostic, so I'm not like putting that off the table. But what I see when I look at your little device here, to me, that makes sense as like a ritual object. And what I mean by that is like with tarot cards or any other witch spell, this object is for the sake of your brain. It's a way to get your brain more directly into this metaphysical level and connect with that metaphysical version of yourself. So when people are tuning into like, what are my spirit guides saying? What is my intuition saying is another way to say it. A box like this is a metaphor for your subconscious to do what the physical avatar version of yourself doesn't think it can do, because it is necessarily locked in this dimension. But you have to then get out of that human locked version into this more metaphysical, and whatever feels real, whatever metaphor like connects with you. That's why this like Napoleon Dynamite ass one, I'm like, hell yeah, absolutely. Because this is the one that you have a personal connection to, that you want it to work. That's perfect for a ritual object. That's why, and you're talking about divination, like with tarot cards, you can divine with anything, whether it's like charms or even fucking, I see people doing Pokemon card readings, right? And you might say that's bullshit, but it's like, well, no, it is literally whatever is going to put you in the state of mind that can connect you to this metaphysical consciousness, because that then allows you to connect, either you want to call it intuition, if we're being very like scientific about it. You know, maybe you're just accessing your subconscious, but maybe that subconscious has one foot in whatever this soup is. And then from there, maybe you believe in that soup there are some entities, angels. Who knows? It's a buffet though up here, right? If angels feels a little hokey to you, you can say like spirits of nature, if anything resonates with you. Or you can just say subconscious. This is an iceberg. This is your conscious. This is your subconscious. That looks like a mountain. I don't care. If it's more comfortable to use that, you could just say subconscious. You can just think about it as like a different dimension, like a fourth dimension.
Let us imagine that into Flatland, hovering above it, comes a strange three-dimensional creature which, oddly enough, looks like an apple. "Hello," says the three-dimensional creature. "How are you? I am a visitor from the third dimension." Well, the poor square looks around his closed house, sees no one there, and what's more, has witnessed a greeting coming from his insides, a voice from within. The three-dimensional creature is unhappy about being considered a psychological aberration, and so he descends to actually enter Flatland. As the apple were to descend through, slither by Flatland, we would progressively see higher and higher slices. As time goes on, sees a set of objects mysteriously appear from nowhere and inside a closed room and change their shape dramatically. His only conclusion could be that he's gone bonkers.